Hello, the countdown to opening day has reached single digits. The Rangers break camp on Saturday and open the 2026 season next Thursday in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. Welcome to this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I'm Evan Grant, here as usual.
We have a great show this week, I hope, as we're going to talk a little bit about the opening roster. We've got a great guest at Ian Kinsler, Evan, making his second appearance on this podcast. Yeah, I think he becomes the first two-time guest, so we didn't scare him off the first time. But Kins's insights are always great.
Yes, and I will give our listeners and viewers, since I'm wearing a different shirt than I was in the interview, a little heads up. The interview with Ian was pre-recorded. And what's great about that is that we got through the interview, and today I can actually hear John and he can hear me. So it's progress here at the Rangers Podcast Central Headquarters.
Yeah, we got our technical crew on it, and hopefully we fixed all of the bugs for this week, and we'll move on. And our archives in Arlington, we're going to do this in a two-part series. There's just
I love series.
So much plethora of things. We're going to do opening day memories. The first, it will be the 20th century for the Rangers, including Evans. And this was not actually opening day. It was opening day in Milwaukee, but it's a pretty good story going back to 1997.
Was that not the season opener? We opened the
we
season
opened at home against
the
Brewers.
That's
and
right.
We went to Milwaukee for a very exciting weekend. So
that's great. Listen, you guys can reach out to each of us on X with any Rangers questions or comments. Hopefully you know me by now. I'm at Evan_P_Grant. And John is at Ranger Blake. We miss, John, we really miss the parking lot information and the jersey information now that you've retired from full-time employment. It would be great if you would just do that on a regular basis for everybody.
I think the Rangers PR account now handles the line. The lineup's got a little bit dicey the last couple of years. When I wasn't traveling, I remember texting a lineup from a mountaintop in Vail one day, and it got a little dicey. So I think things are in good shape now. But let's talk about, speaking of good shape, the Rangers are in their final week in Arizona. They'll come home for 2 exhibition games against the Royals before opening on the season in Philadelphia. And the Rangers haven't opened up with a 2-series road trip for a long time. But Evan, and I hate to say this, but it looks like with Josh Young and Kyle Higashioka back in the lineup on Monday, right now things are looking pretty good from a health standpoint.
Yeah, I think Chris Young would not like for you to say that, but that does seem to be the case. And, to this point, the Rangers have gotten through spring relatively healthy. The biggest injuries have been on the prospect side, where obviously Sebastian Walcott had that internal brace surgery. But it has, I still don't want to say that everything's gone smoothly, because you just haven't been able to run your opening day lineup out there at one time just yet. I thought the Rangers were going to do that on Tuesday of this week, but Evan Carter had a personal day, or on Monday of this week, but Evan Carter had a personal day where he had to attend to some personal business and wasn't in camp. So even with Young and Higashioka back in the lineup, it wasn't the full lineup. And so I'd like to see that roll out, and I'd like to see the exact look of the lineup. I do think when it's all said and done, you're going to have the first 4 have been settled with Nimmo, Langford, Seager, Berger. I think after that, you're looking at something perhaps like Josh Smith hitting 5th, Josh Young hitting 6th, Jock Peterson hitting 7th, Higashioka 8th, and Evan Carter 9th. And that would give the Rangers extreme balance all the way through. Maybe in season, there would be some thoughts if Jock Peterson comes out hot, maybe he moves up to the 5 spot. and Smith moves down to the 7th spot. And certainly there would be some days where that happens anyway. But I think this is what Skip Schumacher is looking at this point going into the season. I love the balance here. The one issue I think, John, with the lineup is, and you can't, there's no way to avoid this, but if Evan Carter's in your lineup, some way, somehow, he's going to be in a stretch of left-handed hitters, and that's what you'd ultimately like to avoid. But this way, it's going to be Carter, Nimmo. So late in the game, a manager might have some ability to send some lefties up there against the Rangers. And then it's going to be up to Skip Schumacher if that's a situation where he wants to send Carter up there, or if he's going to send a pinch hitter up there, maybe somebody like Sam Haggerty if he's not playing that day.
You mentioned Jock Peterson a couple of times, and obviously a real flashpoint for Ranger fans coming off his 2025 performance. But you wrote about Jock Peterson earlier this week and some of the trends where he has a good spring, not as good at the start of the season, bad spring, it's worked the other way. But that aside, because that's a hard metric. What has been the coaching staff's impression of how Peterson has gone about his work and tried to make adjustments this spring?
I think everybody was pleased with how Jock came into camp this year. He was clearly in better shape. I think they feel like he's motivated, and certainly he's a guy who has pride and doesn't want to go out on what was an embarrassing season. There's no way around that. I think he's stuck with his process of working with Justin Veal, and they're trying to get the ball back up in the air more than he did at the second half of last year. And that is kind of a work in progress. But I also, there is something that goes along with being a 12-year major league vet where you trust the work a little bit and expect that even though he's working hard, that when the lights are on and the competition commences for real, it's going to be better. What I will say is that the batted ball exit velocity has been better than it was last spring. So he's hitting balls a little bit harder than he did last spring. And I just feel like, when we talked about all the levels of different dysfunction that the Rangers may have had last year, I think you had Jock coming in, expecting to be, kind of the edgy guy in the clubhouse and help this team really kind of get that edge. And I think he, came to camp and it was hard to really grasp what was going on with this clubhouse, with guys going in different directions. Again, not animosity or hatred, but it was a clubhouse that just seemed fractured. And I think he struggled with that. And I think that impacted his first month performance somewhat. And then after that, it was the injury and you're chasing uphill the whole way.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the fifth starter position. I mean, it seems like we talk about this every week. But you've got obviously Jake Latz and Kumar Rocker. You wrote a few days ago that at one point it looked very much like it was going the direction of Latz, but Rocker here has kind of made a rebound, and it could be they keep both pitchers on the opening day roster.
Yeah, that's what I advocated for in a column that will run in Friday's paper. Is that I think they should keep both those guys. I think they've pitched well enough to deserve the fifth spot. And I think the way I would approach the first month of the season, those first 40 games, is with just a minor bit of manipulation in the rotation, you could limit that sixth starter to 5 starts, or that fifth starter to 6 starts. And you could then have Latz and Rocker available to piggyback on some guys early on when it's cold and when guys may be on more strict pitch counts. And then on the days that they start, providing they're both available, one piggybacks on the other. And then you've got a righty with a lefty behind him or a lefty with a righty behind him. It gives Skip Schumacher some flexibility on how he wants to deploy his weapons against an opponent based on what their lineup is expected to be. And I just think that you're talking about 40 games. We've talked, John, how tough those first 40 games are. And it's hard for me to see that Kumar Rocker and Jacob Latz are not 2 of the 13 best pitching options the Rangers have. And so if I'm leaning in any way, yes, there's some element of I want to keep as much depth as I possibly can. And maybe that costs you Cal Quantrill because he's got an out before the season starts. But if there is any way that I can go with the 13 best pitchers on my staff, that's the way I want to go.
And speaking of starters, the 4 of the 5 or 5 of the 6 starters have had regular work in A games this spring. The one guy, Jacob deGrom, has only pitched in 1 A game, 3 innings. Obviously, that was by design. How has he been approaching getting ready for the season? Well, it looks like he'll pitch the second game of the year, probably.
Yeah, that Saturday game in Philadelphia. And look, he did pitch a minor league game his last time out. I did not see it because the big league club was in Glendale, but everybody who saw that raved about where he was. And I talked to Jacob on Monday, and he was much happier with his slider than he had been all spring. He felt like he's in a good spot. And if there's anybody that should, well, I shouldn't limit it to one person, but if there are 2 guys you don't feel like are losing anything pitching in a minor league game, it's deGrom and Eovaldi. These guys know how to prepare. They know what they're doing. And it is simply about going out there and performing. It's more a lab for deGrom than it is about performance. And I think he got everything he wanted to out of that. And I think when he starts on Saturday, or what will be tomorrow, once this podcast actually gets up, I think it may well be in a minor league game too. So yeah, you'd love to see him face some really established big league hitters. I just don't think that's necessary. This is one of the best pitchers of our lifetimes, and he'll be ready for that start.
And I think we'd be remiss in not talking a little bit about the last 14 days and the World Baseball Classic, which was a great event. The Rangers were not terribly affected by a defection of players, but it's going to be interesting to see. The Red Sox, for instance, I think had 4 or 5 guys in the championship game between Venezuela and the United States. The Rangers weren't that affected by it, but be interesting to see how teams, as their players come back in here for this final week. But it was a great tournament.
Yeah, this was the best version. I think I felt like I said this after 23, but with each tournament, I feel like it gets better and better. The couple things that I would take away from this is, I feel like I've seen some lashing out at Team USA and at Mark DeRosa, and I think it's unnecessary. Venezuela played a perfect game last night and scored the winning run in the 9th inning. They were a really good team, and they played well together. There's been some talk about that Team USA didn't have the same joy on the field that other teams had. This was a team that was out there to compete, and Team USA is in a no-win situation every year in the WBC. If they don't win it, it's considered a failure. Those guys cared. They got the best players that this team has ever had. They went out there and they were in position to win it going to the 9th inning and couldn't do it. And so all I have to say is hats off to Venezuela. And with that, I'm going to say this, and I think we need to schedule him for a podcast at some point in the not too distant future. All I could think about in the 9th inning was former Ranger Robinson Chirinos, who's the bench coach for Venezuela. Yeah. And I know how much how prideful he is in being Venezuelan native. And I texted him this morning just to say congratulations. And I can't imagine the feelings that he had, given everything that Venezuela has been through in recent years, most recently in January. Something great to happen for that country and for those players, I think is just it's just an immeasurable feat to try and put that into what we could actually feel. So great for Robinson. He won the battle of the bench coaches who were ex-Rangers between Chirinos and Michael Young. And maybe we'll get Michael Young on in the not too distant future to talk about how he failed us all.
Right. You won't let him live that down. But anyway, our guest today is Michael's longtime teammate, Ian Kinsler, Ranger Hall of Famer, now a special assistant to the general manager. And we want to talk to him about his look ahead to the season and what he sees so far. We'll talk to Ian next. We're happy to have as our guest on SportsDay Rangers today, Ian Kinsler. Rangers Hall of Famer, played 14 seasons in the big leagues with 5 teams from 2006 to 2009. Of course, the catalyst at the top of the lineup on those Rangers World Series teams in 2010 and 2011. Now in his 4th year as a special assistant to Rangers president Chris Young. Ian, how's you doing? Okay.
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, we're working through some technical difficulties here. So let's start. It's been a busy spring for you. You have a lot of family obligations going on with your daughter, the track star, and your son Jack, the budding baseball star. What's been the last few weeks like?
The last few weeks has been a lot. Track season has started for my daughter with school, traveling around. We just got back from New York actually for a track meet with her, and then my son's starting up baseball, and then trying to get out to Arizona for spring training and get with the team and get the vibe and see what's going on. So it's been a little bit of a whirlwind, but a lot of fun.
Have you been able to follow the World Baseball Classic at all?
Yes, I have. I've pretty much, I wouldn't say I've watched all of the games, but probably 80% of them I've watched.
Did you watch Team Israel?
I did.
They went 2-2 this year, right?
So yeah, I have to officially say Brad Ausmus is a better manager than me.
Well, they also only did in a little easier bracket too, beating the Netherlands and Nicaragua. 3 years ago, you were in a really tough bracket. So, yes, Evan, what's going on with spring training with Ian?
So, Ken, you've already been out here one time. You spent some time with Josh Smith. You spent some time with Cody Freeman, 2 guys in different situations right now, and I know you're fond of both those guys. What kind of information or what kind of what were you looking for in your conversations with Josh Smith as he transitions into this kind of full-time role as the second baseman?
I mean, mostly when I go out to spring training, I try to just be around and be present. These guys work hard at what they're doing, and they have a lot of coaches around them that are with them daily. They're big league baseball players, so they have a good idea of what they need to do to be successful. But just, I think, I always try to look at it from, if it was my perspective as a player, if I was a player and there was an ex-player who was walking around, how would I want them to interact, or where would I want them to be? So I try to be on the field during stretch, because that's usually a lot of banter, a lot of talk going on then. Defensive work, I try to stand around with Josh and be around the bag at second base, and then try to hang out in the cage to see these guys' routines and see how they're going through things. And, if they have any questions, or if they ask anything that I see, or as far as their pregame prep, stuff like that. Conversations just tend to happen when you're around. So that's normally how I approach it. I just want to be around and be present, and then they usually drive the conversations. And this spring has really been no different.
So what does he seek from you? Like in that regard, you're an invaluable resource to a guy, having been a Gold Glove winner, having been a leadoff guy. I know he's not going to hit leadoff this year, but having played second base every day, what does he seek from you?
Well, in the batting cage, we had some discussions. He has this new 2-strike approach that he's been using. And he was talking about how well he's seeing the ball, and, how much time it gives him and how comfortable he is with it. And we were talking about his pre-2-strike approach, or the movements that he had, hitting before 2 strikes. And there were some inconsistencies there. So we talked about how to manage that, and like if he should just go full 2-strike approach and maybe sacrifice some power that he has. And so those types of conversations is what's happening. But I think as we see the springs progressing at the plate, he looks great. I mean, his power stroke's there right now. All the movements, when he's in sync and his movements are in sync, he's really tough out at the plate, and he can create some damage. And then, yeah, go ahead.
And that's the thing for me is like he's in an incredible run this spring. And when I talked to him the other day about this, he said, all the stuff I worked on this winter, about a week into camp, I just said, the hell with it. And I started just picking my leg up and stopped thinking as much. And that's something Justin Vealey, the hitting coach, and I talked about too, is this is a guy who can think a lot about his swing. Did you stress to him at all, like, just be more instinctive, Josh? You don't have to worry about every swing. It's not every swing is going to be perfect.
100%. And have, those conversations that we had about the 2-strike approach, for me, at the big league level, it's about consistency. How consistent can you be on a day in and day out basis? You don't want to go through these huge up and downs where you kind of just disappear on the offensive side for a week. And then you come back and you have a great week. You kind of just want to be a consistent player, somebody that's impacting the game every day. And so simplifying things always helps. And I think, before he had all these movements and he was so in tune with trying to keep everything in sync, his leg kick and his hands and his this and his that, and he just kind of freed up. I think the finding that he had with the 2-strike approach really freed him up mentally with how simple hitting could be. And as you see right now, he seems to be in a really good spot. So it's going good.
Ian, you might agree that infielders might make the best managers. So you've had a chance to be around Skip Schumacher a little bit last year and this year. What do you see from the early time you've kind of seen in his interaction with the team so far?
Listen, with Skip, he's on top of everything, and he's always positive. He always has a positive spin on things. With camp, he's just doing such a great job with the staff, the way the staff has reorganized itself, the new positions that they're in. The new additions to the staff have been fantastic as far as just the vibe of the clubhouse. He's very comfortable in that role. I think he learned a lot in his tenure in Miami, and then having the year off to kind of reflect. I think he's doing an incredible job. He's in a great place right now. Him and CY, see eye to eye and have very good open conversations. He's just very forthcoming. There's no BS. There's no hidden agenda. It's very straightforward. This is how we want to approach playing the game. And he delivers that message frequently, daily, with a great attitude. So there's really, as far as being a manager, that's really what you want from a player's perspective, and Skip embodies all of that. So it's been awesome so far.
It's funny you mentioned that because I had a conversation with Corey Seager yesterday, and we talked a little bit about the vibe. And one of the things that he brought up when I asked him about the messaging that Skip gives is I think it jives well with who Corey is, because he said it's very direct. I don't want to say blunt, but it's direct. It is positive, but there are clear directions that a guy can follow. And for what you know of Corey, which is probably a more intimate knowledge than I have, how do you think those two personalities jive?
I don't know if there could be a better, setup there. Corey is very straightforward. I mean, he wants to get ready for the game. He knows what he needs to do to get ready for the game. He wants his teammates to do the same thing. He wants everybody to be ready to go at 7:00 or 1:00, whatever time the game is. Prepare, meticulously, be ready to go when that first pitch is thrown. And that's kind of the same expectations that Skip has. He's not holding anybody accountable to any sort of thing besides maybe a hitter's meeting or some sort of meeting along the way throughout the day. You get ready for the game the way you know how to get ready. If you need help, ask one of the coaches. We can push you in a direction and help you with those decisions. But as far as the way Skip wants his team to get ready to play, him and Corey are very similar in that regard. And I think, Skip is always delivering the message that he wants, the intention of the way he wants his team to play, aggressively, paying attention to details, constantly prepared. Base running is super important. It's unselfish. All the things the messages that he's delivered, they're very sharp messages, but they're always delivered in a positive way. And I think Corey just, vibes very well with that.
Do I know you were only around for a couple of days. By the time this airs, you will have been back around the club for a few more days. But from my perspective, and let's be clear for everybody else, what the media glimpses in the clubhouse is barely a scratch on the surface of what player relationships are like. And so any theories we have are only superficially informed. But from what I see a guy who is a bit more, a bit louder this spring in a good way. I think, he was the guy who suggested that the team ping pong tournament go from singles to doubles, which kind of involved more people. I saw him in the clubhouse, smack talking loudly yesterday with some guys. What are you hearing about the place that Corey's in as the spring goes on?
He's in a great place. You can just tell. And just like you said, yeah, you might have a little glimpse into it, but you're in that clubhouse a lot and you see guys interacting with each other a lot. You see their body languages. You see how they're, either open to the media, joking around, the interaction they have with their teammates. And you can tell that Corey is a lot more involved with all of that. And I think he understands that winning is fun. And all Corey wants to do is win. Along with that comes fun. I think sometimes players get confused with the fun part comes first and then you can win. Corey doesn't operate that way. Like we need to win first and then we can have fun. But right now, as far as spring training, the tone that's being set in there, the interaction with his teammates, the comfortableness that he has, you can tell that it's Corey's team. I mean, frankly, I think there's a lot of other really good players in there and a lot of really good players that can lead in that clubhouse, which is super important. When you're around the best teams, they have a number of leaders. But Corey's the guy, and he knows that, but he doesn't want to take all of that. I mean, he wants his teammates to feel some leadership as well. It's just a good place right now. You can tell there's a little bit more looseness. He's a little bit more available. I think as far as the play on the field, it reflects in his teammates and in himself. So it's been a really good spring, and spring training can also be a little bit of magic curtain where you don't really know what's going to happen. So getting off to we leave camp with all these guys healthy, ready to go into Philly, is definitely a number one priority. And then just getting off to a good start and the same sort of vibes flowing through the clubhouse is what we're looking for.
Well, let me ask you about the starting pitching staff. When you played and you knew you had a good, strong starting pitching staff, Rangers had a great one, especially in 2011, as you remember. As an offensive player, as a guy going out to the field, how does that play and how does that make you guys feel and everything, give you more confidence?
I can tell you exactly how it makes you feel because we got Cliff Lee in 2010, and that was the first time I'd ever played with like a top 3 pitcher in the game, like a bona fide ace. And when you walk into the clubhouse, normally the first thing you do is you go check the lineup card. And you run your finger down the lineup card and you see who's hitting where. And then you get down to that bottom spot and you see Lee in the pitching spot, and it just relaxes everybody. The training staff's more relaxed. All the offensive players are more relaxed. The catcher's preparation is a lot easier because he knows this guy's just going to be throwing darts and doing what, the game plan asks for. So it just relaxes everybody. And when you have 2 of those guys at the top of your staff, and DeGrom and Evaldi and Evo, it leads to guys that start streaks and guys that also stop the bleeding. You have 2 of those guys that are capable of doing that every week. And that's really what having those types of pitchers, the bona fide aces, guys that can dominate a game, due to a clubhouse. It just kind of relaxes everybody and it allows the offense to breathe.
Ian, let's talk a little bit more about Skip. You and Michael Young both knew him as a player. I think Michael knew him a little bit more closely, but you've talked about his messaging. I think one thing that Skip has made it very clear, I think he idles a little bit like you did as a player at about 60 miles an hour. So I guess that fires you up for him as a manager. But in terms of intensity, what's your take on how this guy will run the club and how that plays out over the course of the season?
That's a really good question. Skip and I had a full season in San Diego together. He was the first base coach, outfield coach in San Diego when my last year playing. So we have a full year together, and he was in charge of the base running and he was in charge of the outfield defense. And those two things we were really good at. I'll just put it that way. There's just an intensity about him. He doesn't mean it. That this is just the way he's built. He's not looking for intensity. He's not trying to create intensity. That's just kind of the way he's built. But like I said before, it's always with this positive swing. It's always with bringing you back to, if something negative happens, what was the positive thing that happened in that situation? And then how are we going to fix the negative thing? That's kind of always been the way that he operates. And it's super refreshing to see somebody, of the same era, somebody that played very similarly to me with the same type of fire. I mean, the dude played all over the diamond, played under great managers, was able to see it in the National League when pitchers hit. He's able to see the game management and how things happen, and being on the bench and seeing it all transpire, and then being able to naturally mature through the coaching ranks, getting the job in Miami, and now being able to run a team in Texas. I think just the maturation process has been awesome. And with his natural instincts to be intense, I think it just leads to a great manager.
He's not afraid to bring up 2011 either. I wonder if he's brought that up to you once or twice.
Well, our handshake in San Diego, we'd do like the whole pound thing like this, and then I'd flip them off. So,
well, that's perfect. Hey, one other guy I wanted to ask you about, another guy who is in the High Sox club with you and Skip, is Cody Freeman. And this is another guy who idles at a high RPM in a positive way. I know you had a talk with him when you were in spring the first time after he had gotten diagnosed with the back issue. I know you had a similar issue to him at one point in time in the back. What do you share with him at that? And what do you share with him about how you handle that? And I'm curious what he shared with you about how he intends to handle it.
Well, he was obviously a little disappointed, right? Like, he knew this was a great opportunity for him. He was playing great. He finished the year strong. He made some waves, and people, are looking forward to seeing how he performs in spring. And then he has this back thing. And honestly, he said his day-to-day was fine. Sleeping was fine, walking around, moving around, he's fine. So that makes it even more difficult, because you feel like you're able-bodied, and the back is just something you got to be really careful with, especially with fractures and stuff. You don't want it to turn into something worse. So he's obviously has to wait the time out. But for me, it's just like, study the game, like, this is your opportunity to be on the bench and watch the game and see if you can learn anything, see if you can help a teammate. Like, that's, you're not useless. There's other things that you can do now that will lead to you being better prepared when you're able to come back. We all love the player that he is. We love the energy that he brings. That's not going to go away. So now it's like, what can I do now to better myself, better my teammates moving forward? And then when I'm healthy, I can hit the ground running and be ready to go. So he's always has a great attitude, always ready to go, wakes up ready to go. It's just the way he is. So we're excited to get him back healthy.
Okay, last one for me here, Ian. Not want to put you on the spot here, but for the Rangers to have a good season, to contend for a playoff spot, what do you see of the, and there's 3 or 4 keys that they really have to do this season?
Well, it's always number one is stay healthy. That's every team across the board. You have to stay healthy. You have to limit, IL visits. You have to be able to get the amount of innings you want from your starting pitching, especially when you have those 4 guys at the top. I think figuring out the bullpen and how we're going to use the bullpen late in games and stress situations, who's gonna step up and take the ball and pitch those pressure situations late in games, I think is key. But for me, it's really the offense, right? For me, the offense has to get back to being super productive and being the team that really was put together last year. And then the additions from this year, the different vibe that we have, the energy that we have, being able to take that next step offensively and be a team that the opposition is worried about. If we can get back to that scoring, I think last year, what was it? If we scored 4 or more runs, the team was like 28-3 or something ridiculous.
You were ridiculously, your win-loss record was ridiculous in that situation.
Right. So if we can pitch the ball somewhat similarly to last year and score 4 or more runs more consistently, we're going to be in a really good spot. But really at the end of the day, it's health. If we can keep all of our guys healthy, we have a really good shot.
And I want to just finish on this with you, Ian. One thing that has stood out to me, and look, there have been a couple of games here lately where teams haven't exactly thrown great pitching at the Rangers, but they've taken 127 walks as we record this, going into the final week of camp. They lead the major league in walks. And at a very superficial level, to me, that's an indication of a better approach. What can you take away from a spring in which a team has made a dramatic turnaround in walks when discipline and approach was such an issue last year?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it's personnel change, messaging. I think a lot of it also is our young guys kind of taking the next step. You see Carter, who's very disciplined at the plate. Langford is very aggressive, but also disciplined at the same time. He's going to attack the ball, but he does a very good job of managing at bats. And when you see young players step into those roles, it pulls everybody forward, right? Where the veteran guy or the guy that's been around for 5 or 6 years, they want to see their at bats go very similar to that. They see the impact that it has, and they say, offense is contagious, right? Well, once a couple guys start showing that discipline and having positive results, it puts pressure on the opposition, and then the other guys want to participate. They want to be a part of it. So it just kind of organically starts happening, and I think that's what's happened this spring. Hopefully, we can continue that trend going into the season. I think, honestly, I don't know where we were ranked last year on weak contact or infield pop flies. Just weak, easy out type of at bats where it seemed very easy for the opposing team to kind of work through our lineup. And I'm just not seeing that this spring, whether it's our second squad guys, the guys that are roster invited, our mainstay guys, whoever it is, it's like every game we just don't see that. And I think that's really something to hang your hat on. There's something different happening. There's a different vibe, just a different energy. So that's really what I look for in spring training.
And that's what I guess that's what I'm getting at. I mean, is that the kind of thing that you think from spring training that actually carries over? That, you see guys with a disciplined approach at the plate and taking walks, and when the lights go on and there's a third deck and all the other cliches that we always throw out, is that the kind of thing that carries over?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so. I wanted to leave spring training on fire. I mean, it felt like, I would come into spring training every year. I was on fire for 2 weeks, and then I'd hit a lull and kind of dragging a little bit, and it becomes very mundane, and you just kind of want to move on. You're ready. You're ready to go, but you got to get your at bats. You got to get on your feet, get your defensive work. And then you're like, oh, camp breaks in a week. I need to get back going offensively, get more locked in. So you want to leave camp on fire and kind of pull that into the season, regardless of how many decks or the lights or whatever. You just want to feel good at the plate and have something going. That's kind of how I always approached it. But I've seen plenty of guys leave camp looking terrible, and then all of a sudden, opening day, we talked about the third deck and the lights, and all of a sudden a switch goes off. and they look like a completely different player. So there's also that, and it works on the flip side as well. You see guys that they're new to the big leagues, they get there, and it's like they're a different player all of a sudden than they were in the sunlight at 1:00 and surprise. So, for me, it's just an energy of the club. I think that carries over more than anything. I think offense is going to go through its ebbs and flows. The on the mound, you're going to have stretches where it's tough, or you're going to be really good and dominant. But really, it's just the energy and paying attention to the detail, the base running, the defense, and I think Skip and the staff has like really buckled down on that this spring. That's really what I'm excited about.
Kins, it's always great to have you on. We didn't throw this in there, but you are the first repeat guest, I believe, that we've had on the Rangers Sports Day podcast. You're the only guy who would come back for more of this.
Do I get like a WWF like championship belt for that?
Yeah, we'll get a belt for you or a jacket of some type. We'll make sure that happens.
Green jacket.
But thanks for coming back on. Look forward to seeing you at camp, even though this will air after we've both left. And look forward to seeing you around the ballpark more this year, as always.
Well, I thought on the archives in Arlington here, we're a week away from the opener overall, 2 weeks away from the home opener. We're going to talk a little bit about opening day memories. And the Rangers, this will be opening day. Unbelievably, it'll be opening day number 55 for the team in Arlington. Contrary to popular belief, I have not seen all 55 opening days. I've seen a lot of opening days, going back to my days working in the press box in Baltimore during college in the 70s. But I'm going to we're going to look at the first half. We're going to look at the 20th century today. And Evan didn't kind of come to the end of it, and I'm only going to touch on a few here that I can remember. So, and I think, and we've talked about this on a earlier podcast that we were on Your Dark Companion. And I will say this was the year before I got to Texas, okay? You can't blame this one on me. Opening day 1984, believe it or not, I was with the Orioles. The Orioles had won the World Series in 83. I was not at opening day in 1984. I was in the Kingdome in Seattle broadcasting the NCAA National Championship game between Georgetown and Houston, and the Hoyas came out on top. And it was a chaotic scene at Memorial Stadium that day. President Reagan came, and I wasn't there. And my boss got into a fight with the Secret Service pool, and it was kind of a mess. But anyway,
that sounds like fun, Don.
Down in Arlington, Texas, the Rangers were opening the season with a 9-1 loss to Cleveland, and not a good Ranger team. But what the Rangers had done in the offseason is they had decided they were no longer going to let fans to bring food and drinks into the ballpark. They wanted to sell more concessions. The problem is they did not really advertise they were doing this. So people on opening day of 1984, it was April 3rd, they showed up with food, sandwiches, all this, everything you can imagine that they'd been doing ever since the club came here. And they confiscated said food, said drink. You can come out and get it at the end. People were not happy. But a family really wasn't happy. When they came out, they had brought a bucket of chicken to the ballpark. They left the chicken at the gate, and when they came back out after the game, all they found was a bucket of chicken bones. The staff had eaten their chicken, and this became the narrative of the day. I mean, the media and everything around here just ran with this, and the Rangers, Eddie Childs was the owner, and 3 weeks later, they basically rescinded this policy, and Eddie said, basically was quoted, said, "I goofed. We're going to let them bring their sandwiches and chicken into the ballpark." So,
did anybody bring any live chickens into the ballpark?
I don't know. Maybe to try to end one of their long losing streaks in that period. We tried a goat one time. I was here for that, and that really didn't work either. 1991 is another one. Speaking of presidents or whatever, George H.W. Bush threw out the first pitch as the sitting President of the United States at Arlington Stadium on April 8th of 91. Now, those of you out there who went to Arlington Stadium, you would probably imagine trying to do a presidential visit in that ballpark was extremely difficult. You're supposed to you set up a whole communication system. It was not easy. But the thing and this was, of course, his son, the 43rd president, George W. Bush, was our team owner at the time. And it was a really exciting time for us. I remember going through a week of preparations, and we had all this set up where the pool would come in, the press pool and everything. And then the one thing I remember, Evan, at the last minute, everything just changed. The president came out from another door, the pool came another way, and I just stood there and shook my head. And his pitch, he also bounced the pitch to Gino Petralli. But I got to meet Marvin Fitzwater, who was the press secretary at the time, so that was pretty cool. So that was 1991. Of course, in 1994, Rangers opened in New York, but we opened our new stadium on April 11th, 94 at the ballpark in Arlington. Glorious day. We had a rain delay, of course, as Rangers tend to do on these big events. Van Cliburn, tremendous rendition of the national anthem. Place was full. Rangers did lose the game, but we were euphoric that we had pulled it off. 20 minutes after this game, I look out. The media looks out to right field, and they see a woman kind of falling over the railing from the upper deck in the home run porch. She had imbibed a little too much, was sitting on the rail, and kind of fell over. Thank God she landed in a seat, was not seriously hurt, but again, we had to go into damage control on what was a glorious day in opening this new ballpark. So typical Ranger luck there.
Didn't that lead to you guys putting in like higher railings and
we
things
put
like
in
that?
higher railings in the upper home run porch, yes. We were at code before, but again, the narrative became we had to put in higher railings, and it really ruined Tom Schieffer's day. After everything he had put into his heart and soul into building that ballpark. So let's go to 1997. This was Evan's first year on the beat. And the Rangers did open the season at home, and 20 teams in Major League Baseball had signed a promotional agreement. I believe it was with True Value to give away baseballs on opening day. And the Rangers did this on opening day, I remember, and we gave them out before the game, and we had a few people throw them on the field. Not a lot. I mean, it wasn't anything big. But we went to Milwaukee to open their season. And it was 35 degrees. The wind was blowing about 30 miles an hour, Evan, if you remember, at Old County Stadium. And the Brewers gave away the baseballs before the game. And
Wait, let's set the stage here too. If you've been to a game at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, you know that people like to tailgate. And, Milwaukee is known for producing a few beers. So that had started early in the morning. Then they gave away the balls as the gates opened. Please, John, proceed with the telling of the story.
Okay, but before that, I think I need to talk about the lineups, too. So the introductions to the lineups, the Milwaukee PA announcer was a very nice gentleman named Bob Betts, who'd been there forever. And he introduces the Rangers non-starters, the Brewers non-starters, and then he starts introducing Phil Garner and the Milwaukee lineup. Did not introduce the Rangers lineup. And Johnny Oates, who had a kind of a bad day with we'll get on to the story, but he starts looking up at the press box at me, of course, and I had to run over to Bob, and I said, Bob, you forgot to introduce the Rangers. And he got all flustered, and he finished the Brewers, and then he introduced the Rangers. So the day didn't get off to a great start, really, anyway, in the lineups. And then there was a water leak over the first base stands behind the dugout. Again, a pipe burst. It was 35 degrees on opening day in Milwaukee. So that happened. And then you had these baseballs. And they started flying onto the field in the second inning of the game. It was the bottom of the second inning. The Brewers were up. And it started as a kind of a few, and then it kind of got more and more. And if you remember, Evan, Johnny went out and pulled the team off the field. And basically said the Rangers can't play and everything. Home plate umpire, I believe, was Jim McKeon. Jim McKeon was a great guy. They got it stopped once with PA announcements and everything. And Kenny Hill was pitching. And what happens was it flusters Hill. Mike Matheny comes up. John Mabry comes up, hits a grand slam, and in the second inning. And at that point, it became a invasion of baseballs, total baseballs. And again, we were pulled off the field again. And if you remember, Phil Garner actually had to get on the microphone and tell the fans, look, if you guys don't stop, they're going to forfeit the game if this happens again. And the Rangers would earn a well-earned forfeit like they did on 10-cent beer night in Cleveland in 1974. But they did manage to get order back to restored. The Brewers won that game. I believe it was 5-3, but there were 3 delays. And the one thing I remember about this as well is McKeon told the Brewers they could not do the sausage race that day in the 7th inning because they were afraid of fans throwing more balls at the sausages running around the track at County Stadium.
That little detail obviously escaped me. We didn't pay quite as close attention to the sausage race at that point in time. But there was one other thing for me that really stood out. Old County Stadium, the press box was small, and it was only made one trip there. But it was a small situation.
Yes, it was.
And, the commissioner of baseball at the time, Bud Selig, a Milwaukee resident and one-time owner of the Brewers, I think he still had the Brewers in trust at that point.
Yes, he did. His daughter was running the team, Wendy, yeah.
And in the middle of the game, Bud just comes up to the press box, starts holding court in the back of the press box, something you would never see with Rob Manfred. And Bud is just talking to reporters, and obviously Ian Jerry Fraley had a relationship, and they're joking, and I'm watching this game take place, and I am like, what in the world have I gotten myself into with the pipe breaking, the balls being flooded onto the field, the manager of the Rangers taking the team off the field, and here's the commissioner of baseball in the back of the press box eating a brat and having a great old time with our other baseball writer. It was quite a welcome to the American League for me. That's all I can say. It was an incredibly fun day in a strange way, but it made for a great story.
But Selig's visits to the press box in Milwaukee, I always enjoyed them over the years, except when we were losing. But I never really yelled at Bud in all those years, which I'm proud of myself because
something of an accomplishment for you.
There were days when things were not going real well for us at that ballpark. And the last thing I will say about this road trip, Evan, if you remember, so it was opening day in Milwaukee. The next day was a scheduled off day. The third day, I think we got snowed out. And we finally played on the 4th day. And I remember in the manager's pre-media of that 4th day, Johnny Oates told us he never left his hotel room from the time after that first game which was on the 7th or 8th, and we didn't play again till the 10th. So he said he's, I don't know how many hours, 70 hours or something in his hotel room in Milwaukee.
And this was something Johnny was very proud of. He was also very proud of the fact that there was a game in that series, maybe it was opening day, that he got back to the hotel and was able to turn off the lights in his room before it got dark outside. He was very excited that he was able to go to bed when it was still light out. I don't know. Johnny appeared that y'all were staying at the Pfister Hotel at that point.
Pfister
on the
Hotel,
historic-
yeah.
historic
Fabulous
hotel.
Pfister.
I don't know if Johnny just enjoyed being with the rumored ghosts in the hotel or what it was, but he was very, very proud of how he had not left the hotel or his room, and that he had gone to bed with the lights out, with the lights still out on the sky.
If you played in Milwaukee in April, you never knew what you were going to get weather-wise. It was always a crapshoot at that old, especially at that old ballpark. So we will take a look at the 21st century in opening days, which Evan has attended probably close to every one, more than I have because I went to work for the Red Sox. But we'll look at that in next week's episode. So with that, we bid you adieu and thank you for joining next week's edition.
And be ready to follow me and Sean McFarland along on our season adventures all summer long. And hopefully we'll have some meaningful baseball to write and discuss with you about.
And we'll talk to you all next week, which one of the great weeks on the calendar, opening day week. We'll see you next week.